The metal shackle on Lucia Owens' wrist had worn a permanent groove into her skin, a constant reminder that she belonged to Marcus Thorne whether she wanted to or not. And as she poured whiskey for another drunk prospector in the Golden Rose Saloon, she wondered if she would ever taste freedom again. It was 1875, and Stockton, California was a growing hub of commerce and vice, positioned perfectly along the San Joaquin River, where riverboats brought in supplies and men looking for opportunities of every kind. The saloon sat on the busiest corner of Main Street, its painted sign promising entertainment and spirits, but inside those walls, Lucia knew the truth. She was trapped, bound by a contract her stepfather had signed when she was barely 18, selling her labor to Marcus Thorne for 5 years to pay off gambling debts that had nothing to do with her. Now, at 22, she had 3 more years stretching before her like an endless desert, each day bleeding into the next with the same faces, the same crude remarks, the same stale tobacco smoke filling her lungs. The dress she wore was crimson silk, too tight across the bodice and cut lower than she preferred, exposing the tops of her shoulders and more of her chest than made her comfortable. Her dark brown hair hung in careful curls that took her an hour each morning to arrange, and rouge painted her cheeks and lips in a way that made her look like someone she did not recognize in the mirror. The other girls who worked the saloon had given up fighting against their circumstances, but Lucia kept a small flame of rebellion burning in her chest, refusing to let Marcus Thorne break her spirit entirely. She moved between tables with practiced grace, dodging wandering hands and deflecting inappropriate suggestions with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. The saloon was packed tonight, filled with cowboys fresh from a cattle drive, miners with gold dust in their pockets, and gamblers trying their luck at the card tables. Piano music jangled from the corner where old Pete hammered away at the keys, and the air was thick with laughter, arguments, and the clink of glass against wood. Marcus Thorne sat at his usual table in the back, surveying his kingdom with cold eyes that missed nothing. He was a heavy man in his 50s, with jowls that hung over his collar and fingers thick with gold rings. He owned 3 saloons in Stockton and had his hands in half the illegal dealings that happened in the county. When his gaze landed on Lucia, she felt her stomach tighten. He gestured for her to approach, and she had no choice but to obey. "You have been looking tired, Lucia," he said, his voice like gravel. "The customers pay good money to see pretty girls with smiles on their faces, not sour expressions like they just bit into a lemon." "I apologize, Mr. Thorne," she said, keeping her voice level. "I will do better. See that you do." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same calculating expression he used when evaluating livestock. "I have had offers for you, you know. Men willing to pay handsomely for private time. I have been generous in refusing them, but my patience is not unlimited." The threat hung in the air between them, clear as day. Lucia clenched her jaw but said nothing. Arguing would only make things worse. Instead, she nodded and turned away, her heart pounding with impotent rage. She retreated to the bar where Samuel, the elderly bartender, gave her a sympathetic look. "Don't let him get to you," Samuel whispered as he poured another round of drinks. "Keep your head down and your wits about you." Before Lucia could respond, the saloon doors swung open with enough force to make several patrons turn and look. A man stepped inside, and even in the crowded room he commanded attention. He was tall, probably just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty trail coat. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but Lucia could see a strong jaw covered in several days of stubble and eyes that were a striking shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to handle himself, and the gun belt slung low on his hips suggested he was not someone to trifle with. The man scanned the room slowly, taking in every detail, before his gaze settled on the bar. He walked over with measured steps, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and pulled out a stool. When he finally removed his hat, Lucia saw dark brown hair that was slightly too long, curling at the ends, and a face that was weathered but handsome in a rugged way. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe 26 or 27, with the kind of face that suggested he had seen his share of trouble and come out the other side. "Whiskey," he said to Samuel, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle for a man of his size. "Leave the bottle." Samuel poured the drink and set the bottle down. The stranger tossed back the first shot without flinching, then poured himself another. His eyes drifted to Lucia, who stood at the other end of the bar arranging glasses on a tray. She felt his gaze on her and glanced up, meeting those gray eyes for just a moment. There was something different in the way he looked at her, not with the hungry, possessive stares she was accustomed to, but with curiosity and something that almost looked like concern. "You work here?" he asked, directing the question at her. "I do," she replied carefully, unsure of his intentions. "Seems like hard work." "It is," he nodded, as if that confirmed something he had been thinking, and took another sip of his whiskey. Lucia expected him to proposition her like most men did, to ask her to sit with him or suggest something more inappropriate, but he simply turned his attention back to his drink. The lack of aggression caught her off guard, and she found herself stealing glances at him as she worked. The evening wore on, and the stranger remained at the bar, nursing his bottle of whiskey with the patience of someone who had nowhere particular to be. Lucia noticed that despite drinking steadily, he showed no signs of intoxication. His movements remained controlled, his eyes alert. She had seen enough drunks to know the difference between a man drinking to forget and a man drinking because it was expected. Around midnight, a commotion erupted near the card tables. One of the cowboys, a young hothead named Billy Carter, was accusing another player of cheating. Voices rose, and suddenly Billy was on his feet, his hand dropping to his gun. The accused man, a slick-looking gambler in a fancy vest, raised his hands in a gesture of peace, but his eyes were calculating the distance to his own weapon. "I am not a cheat," the gambler said coldly. "You are just a poor loser." "You calling me a liar?" Billy's face was flushed with alcohol and anger. The entire saloon seemed to hold its breath. Marcus Thorne started to rise from his seat, but the stranger at the bar was faster. He stood smoothly and walked over to the card table, positioning himself between the two men with a casual ease that suggested he had done this before. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but carrying enough authority to cut through the tension. "I have been watching the game from the bar, and I can tell you both played fair. The cards just did not fall in your favor tonight, friend. No shame in that." Billy turned his glare on the stranger. "This is none of your business, mister." "Maybe not," the stranger agreed. "But I would hate to see someone get shot over a misunderstanding. Besides, the lady over there looks like she has had enough excitement for one evening." He nodded toward Lucia, who had pressed herself against the bar when the argument started. Billy followed his gaze, and something in the stranger's tone made him pause. The anger drained from his face, replaced by embarrassment. "I suppose you are right," Billy muttered. He shot one more suspicious look at the gambler but backed away from the table. "I am done for the night anyway." The tension broke like a snapped rope, and conversations gradually resumed. The stranger returned to his spot at the bar as if nothing had happened. Marcus Thorne settled back into his chair, though his eyes remained fixed on the newcomer with interest. Lucia approached the stranger, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Things could have gotten ugly." He looked at her, and this time his expression softened. "You should not have to deal with that kind of thing." "It is part of the job," she said, though the bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Giving her name felt like giving away a piece of herself, but there was something in his eyes that made her want to answer. Lucia Owens." "Robert Quinn," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but gentle when she shook it. "Most people call me Rob. Are you passing through Stockton, Mr. Quinn?" "Just Rob," he corrected with a slight smile. "And yes, originally. I was on my way up to Oregon, but I might stay a while. This seems like an interesting town." Before Lucia could respond, Marcus Thorne appeared beside them. His bulk seemed even more imposing next to the bar, and his smile did not reach his eyes. "I could not help but notice your quick thinking earlier, Mr. Quinn," Thorne said smoothly. "That kind of level head is rare. Can I offer you a drink on the house?" "I have got one, thanks," Rob said, gesturing to his bottle. "Of course." Thorne's gaze shifted to Lucia. "I see you have met one of my girls. Lucia is quite popular with the customers." The way he said it made Lucia's skin crawl, the implication clear. Rob's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "She seems like she would rather be anywhere else," Rob said bluntly. The statement hung in the air, and Lucia felt her heart skip. Nobody spoke to Marcus Thorne that way, at least not without consequences. Thorne's smile became fixed, more of a grimace. "My employees are well compensated for their work," Thorne said, his voice taking on an edge. "Though I understand a stranger might not appreciate the arrangements we have here." "What kind of arrangements?" Rob asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Lucia works for me under contract. She owes me 3 more years of service, and she is well treated. Fed, housed, and clothed. Many would consider that generous." Rob's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "A contract." "What kind of contract binds someone for years?" "A legal one," Thorne said firmly. "Signed and witnessed. Her stepfather owed me money, and Lucia was kind enough to work off the debt. It is all above board." Lucia wanted to scream that she had no choice, that her stepfather had sold her like property without her consent, but she bit her tongue. Speaking up would only make things worse. Rob looked at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "How much does she still owe?" Rob asked quietly. Thorne laughed, a sound like stones rattling in a can. "Why? You looking to buy her contract? I'm afraid she is not for sale, Mr. Quinn. She is too valuable to my establishment." "Everything has a price," Rob said. "Name it." The saloon had gone quiet again, everyone straining to hear the conversation. Lucia stared at Rob in shock. Was he seriously trying to buy her contract? Why would a stranger do that? Thorne's eyes narrowed, calculating. $5,000, he said finally, naming an astronomical sum. In gold. It was an impossible amount, clearly stated to end the conversation. Most cowboys made about $40 a month. $5,000 was more than most men saw in a lifetime. Lucia felt a crushing disappointment settle over her. For a moment, she had dared to hope. Rob was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "I will be back tomorrow with your money." The entire saloon erupted in murmurs. Thorne's face went through several expressions, settling on suspicious disbelief. "You are joking." "I never joke about money," Rob said. He finished his whiskey, set the glass down carefully, and looked directly at Lucia. "Tomorrow," he said to her, and it sounded like a promise. Then he put his hat back on, turned, and walked out of the saloon, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Lucia could not sleep that night. She lay in the small room she shared with 2 other saloon girls, staring at the ceiling and replaying the conversation over and over. Who was Robert Quinn? Where would a drifter get $5,000 in gold? Was he some kind of outlaw? Or had he been playing a cruel joke, raising her hopes only to crush them? The other girls were equally curious. Mary, a blonde woman in her 30s, sat on her bed and shook her head. "Nobody has that kind of money," she said. "He was bluffing." "But why?" asked Sarah, younger and more optimistic. "What would he gain from it?" "Maybe he is one of those rich men's sons playing at being a cowboy," Mary suggested. "Or maybe he is crazy." Lucia said nothing. She touched the metal shackle on her wrist, the one Marcus Thorne made her wear as a symbol of her bondage. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow she would know if the stranger called Rob Quinn was real or just another disappointment in a long line of them. Morning came slowly. Lucia went through her routine mechanically, washing her face, arranging her hair, putting on the dress that marked her as Thorne's property. The saloon was quieter during the day, opening late in the morning for the serious drinkers and those with nowhere else to go. Thorne was in his office, handling paperwork and counting the previous night's take. Around noon, the doors opened and Rob Quinn walked in. He looked different in the daylight, his face less shadowed, and he carried himself with the same quiet confidence as before. In his hand was a leather saddlebag that looked heavy. Lucia's breath caught in her throat. He had come back. Thorne emerged from his office, his expression a mixture of curiosity and greed. "Mr. Quinn," he said, "I admit I am surprised to see you." "I told you I would come back," Rob said simply. He hefted the saddlebag. "5,000 in gold as requested. I want Lucia's contract." Thorne's eyes gleamed. "Let me see it." Rob walked to the nearest table and appended the bag. Gold coins spilled across the surface, gleaming in the light from the windows. There had to be hundreds of double eagles, each worth $20. Thorne's hands trembled as he reached out to touch them, to verify they were real. "Where did you get this kind of money?" Thorne demanded. "That is my business," Rob said. "The question is, do we have a deal?" Lucia watched in disbelief. The gold was real. He had actually come back with $5,000 to buy her contract. Her mind reeled. Why? What did he want from her? Thorne was already counting, his fingers moving quickly through the coins. When he was satisfied, he looked up with a greedy smile. "We have a deal, Mr. Quinn. Wait here." He disappeared into his office and returned a moment later with a folded piece of paper. Lucia recognized it immediately. The contract, the document that had bound her for the past 4 years and promised 3 more years of servitude. Thorne handed it to Rob with obvious reluctance. "She is your problem now," Thorne said. "Though I will warn you, she has a stubborn streak." Rob took the contract and unfolded it, reading through the terms with a careful eye. Lucia could see her stepfather's signature at the bottom, that scrawling mark that had sealed her fate. When Rob finished reading, he looked at Thorne. "You have your gold," he said. "Now unlock her shackle." Thorne pulled a small key from his pocket and gestured for Lucia to approach. She walked forward on unsteady legs, holding out her wrist. The metal had been there so long it felt like part of her. When Thorne turned the key and the shackle fell away, Lucia gasped. Her wrist was pale where the metal had been, the groove in her skin a stark reminder of her captivity. "There," Thorne said. "She is all yours." Rob folded the contract carefully and put it in his coat pocket. Then he looked at Lucia. "Do you have belongings you need to collect?" She nodded mutely. "Upstairs, just a few things. Go get them. I will wait." Lucia ran up the stairs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Mary and Sarah were in the room and they stared at her in shock when she burst in. "He did it," Lucia said breathlessly. "He actually bought my contract." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "I do not know," Lucia admitted. She grabbed her small bag and started stuffing her few possessions inside. A change of clothes, a hairbrush, a small locket her mother had given her before she died. Everything she owned in the world fit in one bag. Be careful, Mary warned. Men do not spend that kind of money without expecting something in return. Lucia knew she was right, but she did not care. Whatever Rob Quinn wanted, it had to be better than staying in the Golden Rose Saloon. She hugged both women quickly, knowing she might never see them again, and hurried back downstairs. Rob was waiting by the door, his expression patient. When he saw her, he nodded. "Ready?" "Yes." They walked out of the saloon together, and the moment Lucia stepped into the bright California sunshine as a free woman, she felt tears prick her eyes. She had not realized how much she had missed the simple act of walking through a door without permission. Rob had a horse tied to the hitching post, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes. He secured Lucia's bag to the saddle, then turned to face her. For the first time, she saw uncertainty in his expression. "I know you must have questions," he said. "Why?" the word burst out of her. "Why did you do that? You do not know me. That was a fortune." Rob was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Last year I struck gold up in the Sierras. A small claim, but it paid out well. I have been carrying that gold around, trying to figure out what to do with it. When I walked into that saloon last night and saw you, saw the shackle on your wrist and the look in your eyes, I knew." "Knew what?" "That some things are more important than money. Nobody should be forced to live like that, bound against their will." "I could not walk away knowing I had the means to help." Lucia stared at him, searching his face for deception, for hidden motives. All she saw was sincerity. "You spent your entire fortune on a stranger." "I did," he agreed, "and I would do it again." The simple certainty in his voice made something crack in Lucia's chest. She had spent 4 years surrounded by men who saw her as property, as an object to be used. And here was a man who had given up everything to set her free. The tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "I just cannot believe this is real." She felt Rob's hand on her shoulder, gentle and reassuring. "It is real," he said softly. "You are free, Lucia. The contract is gone." "Gone." She looked up at him through her tears. He pulled the contract from his pocket and held it up. Then, before her disbelieving eyes, he struck a match and held the flame to the corner of the paper. The contract caught fire immediately, the edges curling and blackening. Rob held it until the flames threatened his fingers, then dropped it to the dirt and watched it burn completely. When nothing remained but ashes, he ground them into the earth with his boot heel. "Gone," he confirmed. Lucia could not speak. She could only stare at the spot where the contract had burned, the document that had controlled her life for 4 years now reduced to nothing. Rob had not just bought her contract. He had destroyed it, making absolutely certain she was free. "What happens now?" she asked when she found her voice. "That is up to you," Rob said. "I bought the contract, but I do not own you. Nobody does. You are your own person, free to make your own choices." "But you spent everything you had," Lucia protested. "I owe you." "You owe me nothing," he said firmly. "I did this because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected anything in return." Lucia did not know what to say to that. She had never met anyone like Robert Quinn. "Where will you go?" she asked. He shrugged. "I was heading to Oregon, but I am in no hurry. What about you? Do you have family? Somewhere you want to go?" The question hit her like a punch. She had no family, not really. Her mother was dead, and her stepfather had sold her to pay his debts. She had no home, no money, no prospects. The freedom she had just gained suddenly felt terrifying. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted quietly. Rob studied her for a long moment. "I have an idea, but you are free to say no. There is a ranch about 20 miles south of here, near the foothills. My uncle owns it. He is getting older and has been looking for help. I was planning to stop there before heading north. You could come with me, at least until you figure out what you want to do next. Your uncle would take me in, a stranger. My uncle is a good man. If I vouch for you, he will give you a chance. You would work, but you would be paid fairly and treated with respect. It would give you time to find your feet. It was more than Lucia had dared to hope for. A job, a safe place to stay, and time to figure out her future. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "Because everyone deserves a chance," Rob said simply. "And because I would like to think someone would do the same if it were my sister in your position." "You have a sister," he said, and pain flickered across his face. "She died 3 years ago, cholera. She was not much younger than you." Understanding bloomed in Lucia's chest. Rob had not just seen her in that saloon. He had seen his sister, or the fate his sister might have suffered if circumstances had been different. He was doing this for her memory as much as for Lucia. "I would like to come with you," Lucia said. "If the offer is genuine." "It is," Rob assured her. He untied his horse and gestured to the saddle. "Can you ride?" "Not in this dress." He glanced at her saloon dress and nodded. "We will get you something more practical in town. Come on." They walked to the general store, and Rob bought her a simple calico dress, sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. Lucia changed in the back room, and when she emerged, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the painted saloon girl in silk and rouge. In her place was a young woman in practical clothing, ready for whatever came next. Rob smiled when he saw her. "Much better. You ready to go?" "Yes." They left Stockton that afternoon, riding south with Rob's horse carrying both of them. Lucia sat behind him, her arms around his waist to keep her balance. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had been so close to so many men in the saloon, but this felt different. There was no threat in his proximity, no expectation. Just quiet companionship as they rode through the California afternoon. The landscape changed as they left the town behind, becoming more rural and open. Fields of wheat stretched out on either side of the road, and oak trees provided occasional shade. Lucia breathed deeply, tasting fresh air without the taint of tobacco smoke and spilled whiskey. Freedom, she realized, had a smell. It smelled like grass and sunshine and possibility. "Tell me about your uncle," she said as they rode. "His name is Henry Quinn," Rob said. "He is my father's younger brother. He came out to California during the gold rush in '49, like a lot of folks, but he was smart enough to realize the real money was in land, not gold. He bought a ranch and built it up over the years, runs cattle mostly, some horses. It is not a big operation, but it is successful. Does he have family?" His wife died a few years back. "They never had children. It is just him and a couple of ranch hands now. He is in his 60s, still strong, but he has been talking about slowing down." "And you? Why were you heading to Oregon?" Rob was quiet for a moment. "Looking for something new, I guess. I have been drifting since my sister died. Worked as a ranch hand, a guide, a guard on wagon trains. The gold strike was unexpected. I thought maybe I would use the money to buy my own land in Oregon, start fresh." "And now you have no money," Lucia said, guilt rising in her chest. "I have what matters," Rob said, "and I can earn more. Money comes and goes." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses' hooves maintaining a steady rhythm. Lucia found herself studying Rob's profile when he turned to check the trail ahead. He had a strong nose, a determined chin, and those unusual gray eyes that seemed to see more than most people. There was something inherently decent about him, a quality she had almost forgotten existed in men. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they reached a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. Rob guided the horse off the road and down to the water's edge. "We will camp here tonight," he said, dismounting and then helping Lucia down. "The ranch is still about 6 hours away. We will get there by noon tomorrow." Lucia had never camped outside before. She watched as Rob unsaddled his horse and let the animal drink from the creek, then efficiently set up a small camp. He started a fire with practiced ease, and soon flames were crackling cheerfully in the gathering darkness. From his saddlebags, he produced coffee, hardtack, and dried meat. "It is not fancy," he apologized as he handed her a portion. "It is perfect," Lucia said honestly. She sat on a flat rock near the fire, eating the simple meal and watching the stars emerge overhead. The night was cool but not cold, and the sound of the creek was soothing. "Can I ask you something?" Rob said after a while, of course. "That contract, did you have any choice in it?" Lucia shook her head. "My stepfather signed it without telling me. I came home one day and Marcus Thorne was waiting. He showed me the contract and told me I belonged to him now. I tried to fight it, went to the sheriff, but Thorne had made sure everything was legal. The sheriff said there was nothing he could do." "That is not right," Rob said, anger coloring his voice. "People should not be treated like property." "No," Lucia agreed. "They should not. But the law does not always protect people like me." "What about your stepfather? Where is he?" "I do not know. I have not seen him since the day he sold me. I hope I never do." Rob poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. "My sister, Emma, she was always so full of life. She wanted to be a teacher. When she died, it felt like the world lost some of its light. I have been angry for a long time, angry at the unfairness of it. But I realized something last night when I saw you in that saloon." "What?" "That maybe the best way to honor Emma's memory is to help people when I can, to try to make the world a little less cruel." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "So thank you, Lucia. You gave me a purpose I did not know I needed." Lucia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I think your sister would be proud of you," she said softly. They sat together in companionable silence, listening to the creek and the crackling fire. Eventually, Rob laid out his bedroll for Lucia and insisted she take it. He would sleep with his saddle as a pillow and his coat as a blanket. She protested, but he was adamant. "You have been through enough," he said. "Get some rest." Lucia lay down on the bedroll, staring up at the vast expanse of stars. Her wrist still felt strange without the shackle, like a phantom weight. She touched the groove in her skin, a scar that would take time to fade. But she was free. After 4 years of captivity, she was finally free. She fell asleep listening to the night sounds of the California wilderness, feeling safer than she had in years. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Lucia woke to find Rob already up, tending the fire and preparing breakfast. He had caught a rabbit at some point during the night, and it was roasting over the flames. The sight of him working efficiently around the camp, his movements sure and practiced, made something warm bloom in Lucia's chest. "Good morning," he said when he noticed she was awake. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in years," she admitted, sitting up. "Thank you." They ate breakfast and broke camp, then continued south toward the ranch. The land became more hilly, with oak-covered slopes and meadows dotted with wildflowers. Cattle grazed in some of the fields, and Lucia spotted several ranches in the distance. "We are on Quinn land now," Rob said as they rode. "My uncle owns about 2,000 acres stretching from the road to those hills." "It is beautiful," Lucia said, meaning it. They reached the ranch house around midday, just as Rob had predicted. It was a substantial structure, built from wood and stone, with a wide porch and a barn nearby. Several horses were in the corral, and Lucia could see cattle dotting the distant fields. It looked prosperous and well-maintained. An older man emerged from the barn as they rode up. He was tall and lean, with white hair and a weathered face that broke into a smile when he recognized Rob. "Robert," he called, striding forward. "I was not expecting you." Rob dismounted and embraced his uncle warmly. "Hello, Uncle Henry. I know it has been a while." "Over a year," Henry agreed. Then his eyes shifted to Lucia, curious but not unwelcoming. "And who is this?" "This is Lucia Owens," Rob said, helping her down from the horse. "Lucia, this is my uncle, Henry Quinn." "Pleased to meet you, sir," Lucia said, suddenly nervous. Henry tipped his hat to her. "The pleasure is mine, miss. Any friend of Robert's is welcome here. Come inside, both of you. You must be tired from the road." The ranch house was comfortable and well furnished, with the lived-in look of a place that was truly a home. Henry led them to the kitchen and poured coffee, then settled into a chair and looked at Rob expectantly. "So," he said, "are you going to tell me what this is about?" Rob told the story, starting with his arrival at the Golden Rose Saloon and ending with the burned contract. Henry listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as the tale unfolded. When Rob finished, Henry was quiet for a long moment. "You spent your entire gold strike on a stranger," Henry said finally. "Yes. And now you are broke." "Yes." Henry looked at Lucia, studying her with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through her. Then he turned back to Rob and shook his head, but there was admiration in his expression. "You are just like your father," he said. "Too damned noble for your own good, but I cannot fault your heart." He looked at Lucia again. "Miss Owens, my nephew seems to think highly of you and his judgment is usually sound. I could use help around here. The work is hard but honest. Room and board plus $30 a month. Does that sound fair?" $30 a month was more than Lucia had ever made in her life. At the saloon, Thorne had kept all her earnings, claiming they went toward room and board. "That is very generous, Mr. Quinn." "Just Henry," he said. "We do not stand on ceremony here." Now there is a small cabin out past the barn. It used to be the foreman's quarters, but we have not had a foreman in years. It needs cleaning, but it is sound. You can stay there and have your privacy." "Thank you," Lucia said, overwhelmed by his kindness. "I will work hard, I promise." "I believe you will," Henry said. He stood and clapped Rob on the shoulder. "As for you, you are family. Your old room is still available, and I could use another hand around here if you are staying." "I was planning to head to Oregon," Rob said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Oregon will still be there next month," Henry said. "Stay a while, help an old man with his ranch. Besides, you cannot leave me to train Miss Owens on my own. She will need someone to show her the ropes." Rob looked at Lucia and she saw the question in his eyes. Was this what she wanted? "Did she want him to stay? I would appreciate the help," she said softly. "Everything here is new to me." Rob smiled and Lucia felt her heart skip. "Then I will stay for a while," he said to Henry. "But I am taking the same pay as Lucia. I am not family charity." Henry laughed. "Stubborn, just like your father. Fine. $30 a month and board for you two. Now let me show you both around." The ranch was impressive, with a functioning cattle operation, a large vegetable garden, chickens, and a small orchard. Henry employed 2 other ranch hands, brothers named Tom and Jim Whitmore, who were out checking fence lines but would be back that evening. The work was varied and constant, from tending animals to maintaining buildings to bringing in the harvest from the garden. Lucia's cabin was small but comfortable, with a single room that held a bed, a table, a stove, and a chair. It had a window that looked out toward the hills, and best of all, it had a door with a lock on the inside. After years of sharing a room with other girls and having no privacy, the cabin felt like a palace. "I will help you clean it up," Rob said, standing in the doorway. Together they swept out the dust, beat the mattress until it was clean, and scrubbed the stove until it shined. Rob brought fresh linens from the main house, and Lucia made up the bed. By the time they finished, the sun was setting again, painting her little window gold. "It is perfect," Lucia said, looking around with satisfaction. "You deserve it," Rob said. "A place of your own." She turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life so completely in just 2 days. "Robert Quinn, I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," he said. "Just be happy. That is all I want." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning Lucia was not quite ready to examine. Instead, she smiled and said, "I will try." Over the following weeks, Lucia settled into ranch life with surprising ease. The work was hard, as Henry had promised, but it was satisfying in a way serving drinks had never been. She learned to milk cows, gather eggs, tend the vegetable garden, and prepare meals. Henry was a patient teacher, and Rob was always nearby to offer help or encouragement. The ranch hands, Tom and Jim, were good men in their 40s who treated her with respect. They were brothers who had worked for Henry for over a decade, and they welcomed both Lucia and Rob without reservation. Dinners at the ranch house became a nightly gathering where they all ate together and shared stories of the day. Lucia felt herself changing in subtle ways. The permanent tension she had carried in her shoulders began to ease. She smiled more, laughed more. The groove in her wrist started to fade, though she knew the scar would always be there, a reminder of where she had been. But scars, she was learning, were not just marks of pain. They were also proof of survival. She found herself watching Rob more than she probably should. He was always working, whether mending fences, training horses, or helping Tom and Jim with the cattle. He moved with the easy competence of someone who had spent his life doing physical labor, and there was a quiet strength in him that Lucia found deeply attractive. But more than his physical presence, it was his character that drew her. He was unfailingly kind, not just to her but to everyone. He had a way of seeing what needed to be done and doing it without being asked. He was patient with the animals and respectful to Henry. He never raised his voice in anger, and his word was absolutely reliable. Lucia caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, listening for his voice. When they worked together, which was often, she was hyper-aware of his presence. The accidental brush of his hand against hers sent electricity up her arm. The sound of his laugh made her smile even when she did not know what was funny. She tried to tell herself it was gratitude, that she was confusing appreciation for something deeper. But she knew she was lying to herself. She was falling in love with Robert Quinn, and the realization terrified her. One evening, about a month after they arrived at the ranch, Lucia was in the garden picking tomatoes when Rob found her. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground, and the air was finally cooling from the heat of the day. "Need help?" he asked, picking up a basket. "I would not say no," she replied. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, moving between the rows of plants. The garden was thriving, and Lucia took pride in its health. She had discovered she had a talent for growing things. "You look happy," Rob observed. "I am," Lucia said, realizing it was true. "Happier than I have been in a long time. I am glad." He paused, then added, "You deserve to be happy." "So do you," Lucia said. "Are you happy here?" Rob considered the question. "Yes," he said slowly. "More than I expected to be. Oregon does not seem as urgent as it did a month ago." Lucia's heart leaped at his words, but she tried to keep her voice casual. "You are thinking about staying?" "Maybe. Henry has been hinting that he wants me to take over the ranch eventually. Says he is getting too old for the responsibility." "Would you want that?" "Running a ranch, I think I would," Rob said. "It is good work, meaningful work, and I like being close to family again." He looked at her as he said it, and Lucia wondered if she was imagining the deeper meaning in his words. Did he consider her part of what was keeping him here? Or was she reading too much into a simple statement? "I think you would be good at it," she said. "You are a natural leader." "That is kind of you to say." He set down his basket and moved closer to her. "Lucia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you want? For your future, I mean. Do you plan to stay here, or is this just temporary while you figure things out?" It was a fair question, one Lucia had been asking herself. "I do not know," she admitted. "When I was in the saloon, all I wanted was freedom. Now that I have it, I am not sure what to do with it, but I like it here. I like the work, the people. I like having a home." "You could stay as long as you want," Rob said. "Henry has already told me he hopes you will. He says you are the best help he has had in years." "That is good to know." Lucia hesitated, then decided to be brave. "What about you? Do you want me to stay?" Rob's gray eyes locked onto hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "Yes," he said quietly. "I want you to stay very much." The air between them seemed to thicken. Lucia was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way the fading sunlight caught in his hair, of the rapid beating of her own heart. "Why?" she asked, even though she was afraid of the answer. "Because," Rob said, taking a step closer, "in the month since we met, you have become important to me, more important than I know how to explain. I find myself looking for excuses to be near you. I think about you when we are apart. And I know it is probably too soon, and I have no right to feel this way, but I cannot seem to help it." Lucia felt tears prick her eyes. "You have every right," she said, "because I feel the same way." Rob's expression transformed, hope and joy flooding his features. "You do?" "Yes." She laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I have been trying not to feel this way, telling myself it was too soon, that I was confused. But Robert Quinn, I think I am falling in love with you." "Lucia," he breathed, and then his hands were cupping her face gently, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you in that saloon. I told myself I was helping a stranger, but the truth is, you captured my heart before I even knew your name." "Kiss me," Lucia whispered. Rob needed no further encouragement. He lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was tender and sweet and full of promise. Lucia melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as his encircled her waist. The kiss deepened, and Lucia felt like she was being remade, all the broken pieces of herself fusing back together in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rob rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he murmured. "I thought I was just helping someone. I did not know I was finding the other half of my soul." "Neither did I," Lucia said, "but I am so glad we did." They stood together in the garden as the sun set completely, holding each other and talking about everything and nothing. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, being in his arms. Lucia had spent 4 years being touched by men who saw her as an object, but Rob touched her like she was precious, like she mattered. When they finally returned to the ranch house, hand in hand, Henry took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "About time," he said. "I was wondering how long you two would dance around your feelings." Rob laughed. "Were we that obvious as a cattle stampede," Henry said, "but I am happy for you both, truly." That night, Lucia lay in her little cabin with a smile on her face, unable to sleep for the joy bubbling in her chest. She had gone from captivity to freedom, from despair to hope, from loneliness to love. It seemed impossible that life could change so drastically in such a short time. The next few months passed in a blur of work and happiness. Rob and Lucia became inseparable, working side by side during the day and stealing moments together whenever they could. They took long walks in the evenings, exploring the ranch and talking about their dreams for the future. Rob told her about his childhood, his sister Emma, and the grief that had shaped him. Lucia shared her own history, the pain of losing her mother, the betrayal of her stepfather, and the years of captivity that had nearly broken her spirit. They learned each other's quirks and habits. Lucia discovered that Rob hummed while he worked, that he had a sweet tooth and could eat an entire pie if left unsupervised, and that he was afraid of nothing except losing people he loved. Rob learned that Lucia was stronger than she looked, that she had a wicked sense of humor once she felt safe enough to let it show, and that she talked in her sleep sometimes, murmuring fragments of dreams he wished he could see. Henry watched their courtship with obvious approval, often making himself scarce to give them privacy. Tom and Jim teased them good-naturedly, but it was clear they were happy for the couple. The ranch felt more like a family than just a business, and Lucia finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere. In October, Rob took Lucia into Stockton for the Harvest Festival. It was the first time she had returned to town since the day he bought her contract, and she felt a mixture of nervousness and defiance as they rode down Main Street. They passed the Golden Rose Saloon, and Lucia saw Marcus Thorne standing outside, his bulk unmistakable. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Lucia lifted her chin, letting him see that she was thriving, that his hold on her was truly broken. Thorne's expression darkened, but he said nothing, just watched as they rode past. The festival was wonderful, full of music and dancing and laughter. Rob bought her candied apples and won her a ribbon at the shooting competition. They danced in the town square under strings of lanterns, and Lucia felt like she was floating. When Rob pulled her close and whispered, "I love you," she whispered it back without hesitation. As they rode home that night, Rob pulled the horse to a stop on a hill overlooking the ranch. The moon was full, bathing everything in silver light. He dismounted and helped Lucia down, then took both her hands in his. "Lucia Owens," he said, his voice serious. "I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my heart, my home, my future. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" Lucia's breath caught. She had dreamed of this moment without daring to believe it would come. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Robert Quinn, I will marry you." Rob let out a whoop of joy and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and promise into it. Lucia kissed him back with equal fervor, thinking how far she had come from that girl in the saloon with a shackle on her wrist. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Henry officiating and Tom and Jim as witnesses. Lucia wore a simple white dress that Henry had ordered from San Francisco, and Rob wore his best suit. They exchanged vows in the living room of the ranch house, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they lived. "I give you my name, my heart, and my life," Rob said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "From this day forward, you will never be alone." "I give you my trust, my love, and my future," Lucia replied. "From this day forward, you are my home." Henry pronounced them husband and wife, and when Rob kissed his bride, the small gathering erupted in cheers. It was not a grand wedding, but it was perfect, filled with love and genuine happiness. That night, Rob carried Lucia over the threshold of the small cabin that had been expanded and renovated to accommodate a married couple. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Lucia said truthfully. They came together with tenderness and passion, exploring each other with gentle hands and whispered endearments. For Lucia, it was the first time intimacy felt like a choice, like a gift rather than an obligation. Rob was patient and loving, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. When they finally joined together, Lucia cried, overwhelmed by the beauty of it, by the feeling of being truly connected to another soul. Afterward, they lay tangled together and Rob traced the fading scar on her wrist. "You will never wear chains again," he promised. "Not while I draw breath." "I know," Lucia said, kissing him softly. "You freed me in every way that matters." The winter passed in domestic bliss. Rob officially became Henry's partner in the ranch, learning the business side of the operation while Lucia managed the household and continued to work the garden and tend the animals. They talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, about the children they hoped to have someday. In March, Lucia discovered she was pregnant. She told Rob one evening after dinner, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said, watching his face. Rob's expression went through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. "A baby? Are you certain?" "I am certain. By fall we will be 3 instead of 2. Rob pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for this gift, for everything you have given me." "We made this together," Lucia said. "This child is proof of the life we built, the love we share." Henry was thrilled when they told him, immediately declaring that he was too young to be called great uncle and insisting on just being called Uncle Henry. He started building a cradle in the barn, working on it in secret as a surprise. Tom and Jim were equally excited, already planning to teach the baby to ride as soon as he or she was old enough. The pregnancy was not easy. Lucia dealt with morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon and fatigue that made simple tasks exhausting. But Rob was attentive and patient, taking over her chores without complaint and making sure she rested. He read to her in the evenings, his deep voice soothing, and rubbed her feet when they swelled in the summer heat. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her one night as they lay in bed. "How do you know?" Lucia asked, her hand on her rounded belly. "Because you have so much love to give. I see it in everything you do, how you care for the animals, how you tend the garden, how you treat everyone around you. Our child will be so lucky to have you." "Our child will be lucky to have you," Lucia countered. "You are the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known." Rob kissed her forehead. "Then our child will be lucky to have us both. We will give them the kind of childhood we wished we had." In September, as the leaves began to turn gold on the oak trees, Lucia went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Rob stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and offering words of encouragement even when she screamed at him to shut up. The midwife Henry had brought in from town worked efficiently, coaching Lucia through each contraction. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, Lucia gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's cry. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Lucia's chest. Lucia looked down at her son, this tiny perfect person, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He had a shock of dark hair and Rob's nose, and when he opened his eyes, they were a milky blue that would probably turn gray like his father's. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Rob was crying unashamedly, staring at his son with wonder. "He is perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on one. Looking at her son, Lucia suddenly knew. "Emmett," she said. "After Emma. Your sister. We can call him Emmett James after his great-uncle Henry, whose middle name is James." Rob looked at her with such love and gratitude that Lucia felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Emmett James Quinn," he said, testing it out. "It is perfect. She would have loved him." Henry was allowed in shortly after, and the tough old rancher took one look at his great-nephew and promptly burst into tears. "He is beautiful," he said, carefully holding the baby. Welcome to the family, Emmett. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Emmett was a good baby, generally happy, though he had strong opinions about when he wanted to eat and sleep. Lucia discovered reserves of strength she did not know she possessed, functioning on minimal sleep and constant alertness. Rob was an involved father, changing nappies, walking the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, and singing lullabies in his off-key baritone that somehow always worked. They were a family, complete and whole. Lucia would sometimes stand in the doorway of their cabin, watching Rob play with Emmett on the floor, and have to pinch herself to believe it was real. She had gone from slavery to this, from hopelessness to a life so full of love she sometimes felt like she would burst with it. As Emmett grew, he became the darling of the ranch. Tom and Jim competed for his attention, making him toys and taking turns pushing him around in a small wagon they built. Henry spent hours with his great-nephew, telling him stories and letting him help with simple chores. The ranch became a place of laughter and joy, centered around the bright-eyed little boy who captured everyone's heart. When Emmett was 2, Lucia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Rob was even more protective, if that was possible, constantly fussing over her and making sure she did not overdo it. In the spring, she gave birth to a daughter with Lucia's dark brown hair and eyes that were already clearly going to be Rob's gray. "What should we name her?" Rob asked, cradling his daughter with the ease of an experienced father. "I have been thinking," Lucia said. "What about Rose? After the flower, not the Saloon," she added quickly. Rob smiled. "Rose Quinn, I like it. Rose Margaret, perfect." Rose was a completely different baby than Emmett had been. Where he was easygoing and happy, she was fierce and determined, letting everyone know when she was displeased. Rob joked that she had inherited her mother's strength and stubbornness. "She is going to be trouble," he said with obvious pride as Rose gripped his finger with surprising force. "Good," Lucia said. "The world needs strong women who know their own minds." As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Rob proved to be an excellent manager, expanding their operation and building a reputation for quality cattle and horses. Lucia ran the household with efficiency, raised their children, and became known in the community as someone who could be relied upon for help or advice. They added 2 more children to their family. Another boy they named Samuel, after the kind bartender who had shown Lucia compassion. And finally, another daughter named Clara. Henry lived to see all 4 of his great-nieces and nephews, delighting in the chaos and joy they brought to the ranch. He passed away peacefully in his sleep when Emmett was 10. Leaving the ranch entirely to Rob with the condition that Lucia be equal partner in the operation. His will stated clearly that she had earned her place through hard work and dedication, and that the ranch would not be what it was without her. The loss of Henry hit them all hard. He had been the foundation of their family, the one who gave them all a chance. But his legacy lived on in the thriving ranch, in the happy family he had helped create, and in the values he had instilled in everyone who knew him. Rob stood at Henry's grave, his children around him, and spoke clearly. "Thank you, Uncle Henry, for everything. For taking me in, for giving Lucia a home, for loving our children. You taught me what it means to be a good man, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to your example." Life continued as it does. Emmett grew tall and strong, with his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. Rose was indeed trouble, but the best kind, constantly challenging expectations and pushing boundaries. Samuel was gentle and thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals. Clara was the baby, spoiled by everyone but somehow remaining sweet-natured and kind. Lucia watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and wonder. She taught them about hard work and resilience. Rob taught them about honor and integrity. Together, they created a home where their children felt safe and loved, where they could be themselves without fear. One evening, when Emmett was 15 and Clara was 5, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. It had become their tradition, this time together watching the sunset and sharing the events of the day. Rob sat in his rocking chair with Clara on his lap, while Lucia settled beside him with Samuel leaning against her. Emmett and Rose sat on the porch steps, arguing good-naturedly about something trivial. "Mama," Clara said, playing with her mother's hair, "tell us the story of how you and Papa met." It was a request they made often, and Lucia never tired of it. She exchanged a glance with Rob, saw the love and understanding in his eyes, and began. "Once upon a time I was lost," she said. "I was trapped in a dark place, and I did not think I would ever find my way out. But then one night, a cowboy walked through a door and everything changed." She told the story as she always did, editing out the worst parts but keeping the heart of it. She told them about Rob's kindness, about the burning of the contract, about coming to the ranch and falling in love. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it dozens of times. "And that is why we named you Emmett," she finished, looking at her eldest son. "After your Aunt Emma, who your father loved very much. She would have adored all of you. You think Papa is a hero?" Clara asked seriously. Lucia looked at Rob, this man who had given her everything, who had loved her from the moment he saw her and never stopped. "Yes," she said firmly. "Your Papa is the best kind of hero, the kind who sees someone who needs help and does not look away." Rob's eyes were suspiciously bright. He cleared his throat. "Your Mama is the hero," he said. "She survived things that would have broken most people. She fought for her freedom even when it seemed impossible. And she built this family with strength and love. Everything good in my life started the day I met her." The children groaned at their parents' obvious affection, but they were smiling. This was the love they had grown up with, the kind that was demonstrative and real and unashamed. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Lucia took Rob's hand. He squeezed back, his thumb tracing the faint scar on her wrist, that reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. "Thank you," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "For what?" Rob asked. "For seeing me. For saving me. For loving me. For giving me this life." "Lucia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you saved me just as much as I saved you. You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a place to call home. You gave me a family, a purpose, and a love I never thought I would find. I am the one who should be grateful." They sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by their children, on the land they had built into a thriving home. The ranch spread out around them, 2,000 acres of possibility and promise. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully and horses ran in the pasture. The vegetable garden was bursting with produce, and the orchard was heavy with fruit. It was a good life, built on hard work and sustained by love. Emmett eventually left the porch to tend to evening chores, and Rose followed to help him. Samuel and Clara stayed a while longer, but eventually they too wandered off, leaving Rob and Lucia alone in the gathering dusk. "Do you ever think about that night?" Rob asked. "The night we met, all the time," Lucia admitted. "I remember thinking my life was over, that I would never escape, and then you walked in and everything changed in an instant. It felt like fate." "Maybe it was," Rob said. "I almost did not go into that saloon. I was going to ride straight through Stockton, but something made me stop, made me walk through that door. Maybe Emma was watching over me, guiding me to where I needed to be. I like to think so, Lucia said. I like to think she brought us together. They rocked gently in their chairs, hands clasped, hearts full. Around them, the ranch settled into evening rhythms. They could hear Emmett and Rose laughing in the barn, the lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets. It was the sound of home. "I love you, Lucia Quinn," Rob said. "I have loved you for 10 years, and I will love you for 10,000 more." "I love you, Robert Quinn," Lucia replied. "My hero, my heart, my home." They sat together as the stars emerged, one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over Lucia during her captivity now witnessed her happiness. The same moon that had seen her despair now illuminated her joy. She had been forced to serve in a saloon, bound by a contract that was not of her making. And then a cowboy had walked into her life, bought that contract and burned it, setting her free in every way that mattered. It had been the beginning of everything. The beginning of freedom, of love, of family, of a life more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. And as Lucia sat on the porch of the home she had built with the man she loved, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing children. Emmett eventually took over much of the ranch operations, working side by side with his father and proving to be a natural leader. Rose surprised everyone by becoming interested in the business side of things, keeping meticulous books and finding ways to increase their profits. Samuel discovered a talent for horse training and began breeding horses that became sought after throughout California. Clara, the baby, showed an interest in teaching and often helped educate the children of ranch hands and neighboring families. When Emmett turned 21, he announced his intention to marry a young woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held on Quinn land, with half the county attending. Lucia watched her son exchange vows with tears in her eyes, remembering her own simple wedding in the ranch house living room. "We did good," Rob whispered in her ear as they watched Emmett kiss his bride. "We did," Lucia agreed. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They built additional housing for married ranch hands, expanded the barn, and added more land to their holdings. The Quinn name became synonymous with quality and integrity in the region. People knew that if a Quinn gave their word, they could count on it. But despite their success and the demands of running a large operation, Rob and Lucia always made time for each other. They still took evening walks, still sat on the porch watching sunsets, still stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was looking. Their love had not dimmed with time. If anything, it had deepened, becoming richer and more complex as they built a life together one day. Many years after that first meeting in the saloon, Lucia was in town purchasing supplies when she saw a familiar figure. Marcus Thorne had aged poorly, his bulk turned to fat, his face florid with drink. He was standing outside what remained of the Golden Rose Saloon, which had seen better days. When he saw Lucia, something flickered in his eyes, a recognition and a grudge held too long. "Well, well," he said, his voice slurred. "If it is not Lucia Owens, or is it Quinn now?" "It is Quinn," Lucia said calmly. She was not afraid of him anymore. "Mr. Thorne." "You cost me money, you know," he said bitterly. "After you left, the other girls got ideas. 2 of them ran off." "Bad for business." "Good," Lucia said without sympathy. "They deserved freedom just like I did." "That cowboy of yours," Thorne continued. "He ruined my plans. I had buyers lined up, men willing to pay top dollar for you. I could have made a fortune." Lucia felt cold wash over her, understanding exactly what he meant. Rob had not just saved her from servitude. He had saved her from something much worse. "If you come near me or my family," she said, her voice like steel, "my husband will make you regret it. And before he gets to you, I will make you regret it. I am not the scared girl you once owned. I am a Quinn now, and we protect what is ours." Thorne took a step back, seeing something in her face that made him reconsider. "I was just making conversation," he muttered. "Then let me give you something to think about," Lucia said. "Those girls you kept in bondage, they are all free now, every single one of them. The law has changed, and men like you do not get to own people anymore. Your time is over, Mr. Thorne. I suggest you make peace with that." She walked away without waiting for a response, her head held high. When she told Rob about the encounter later, he pulled her into his arms. "Are you all right?" he asked with concern. "I am better than all right," Lucia said. "I stood up to him, Rob. I was not afraid. He could not hurt me anymore because I am not that powerless girl. I am a woman with a family, a home, and a life I built. He has no power over me." Rob kissed her forehead. "I am so proud of you. You have always been strong, but watching you come into your own power has been one of the great privileges of my life." As they grew older, Rob's hair turned silver at the temples, and lines formed around Lucia's eyes from years of smiling. Their children grew and started families of their own, filling the ranch with grandchildren who ran and played just as their parents had done. The main house expanded to accommodate family gatherings, and the ranch became a gathering place for the growing Quinn clan. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Rob took Lucia back to the hill where he had proposed. They rode together on the same horse, her arms around his waist just like that first day. When they reached the top, they dismounted and looked out over the land they had built together. 20 years, Rob said wonderingly. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime all at once." "It has been the best 20 years of my life," Lucia said. "Every single day with you has been a gift." "Do you ever regret it?" Rob asked. "Not the marriage," he clarified quickly. "But the path that led you here, the years in the saloon, I know they caused you pain." Lucia thought about it carefully. "I hate what happened to me," she said finally. "I hate that I was sold like property, that I lost years of my life to that place. But if I had not been there, I never would have met you, and I would not trade what we have for anything. So maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to, even the hard parts. They led me here to you, to this life." "That is a generous way to look at it," Rob said. "I learned generosity from you," Lucia said, touching his face gently. "You taught me that love is not about possession. It is about freedom. You freed me and then loved me without expectation. You gave me space to become who I was meant to be. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Rob kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of 2 decades of devotion. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Here is to 20 more years," he said. "And 20 after that," Lucia added. They got their wish. Rob and Lucia lived long, full lives, seeing their children become successful adults, their grandchildren grow, and even meeting several great-grandchildren. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding their own touches while maintaining the core values of hard work, integrity, and love that Rob and Lucia had established. When Rob finally passed away at the age of 78, surrounded by family, his last words were to Lucia. "Thank you," he whispered, holding her hand. "Thank you for the adventure." "Thank you for saving me," Lucia whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "We saved each other," Rob said. And then he closed his eyes and was gone. Lucia mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the life they had shared. At his funeral, she stood before the gathered family and friends and told their story one more time. She told them about a cowboy who walked into a saloon and changed her life. about a man who spent his fortune to free a stranger, about love that grew from kindness and blossomed into something that sustained them through decades. "Robert Quinn was the best man I ever knew," she said. "He taught me about courage, about love, about the kind of person I wanted to be. He gave me freedom and then stood beside me as I figured out what to do with it. He was my partner, my love, my home. And though he is gone, what we built together remains. It lives on in our children, our grandchildren, and this land we loved so much." Lucia lived another 5 years after Rob's death, spending her time with family and ensuring the ranch continued to thrive. She never remarried, saying that she had already had the great love of her life and needed no other. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, at the age of 81, the entire community mourned the loss of a remarkable woman. They buried her next to Rob, on the hill where he had proposed, with a view of the ranch spreading out below. Her tombstone reads simply, "Lucia Quinn, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She was bound, but love set her free." The story of Rob and Lucia became legend in the family, passed down through generations. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the ranch, still worked the land, still told the story of how their family began. It was a story about love and freedom, about seeing someone in need and choosing to help, about how one act of kindness can ripple through generations. The small cabin where Rob and Lucia had started their married life was preserved and maintained as a family shrine of sorts, a reminder of humble beginnings and the power of love. Young couples in the family sometimes spent their wedding nights there, hoping to capture some of the magic that Rob and Lucia had found. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the California hills painting the sky in brilliant colors, the family gathered on the porch of the main house, just as Rob and Lucia had done so many years before. They rocked in their chairs, held hands with the ones they loved, and watched the stars emerge one by one. The Quinn Ranch stood as testament to what two people could build when they loved each other truly, when they worked together toward common dreams, when they chose kindness and integrity over selfishness and greed. It was a legacy that extended far beyond land and cattle. It was a legacy of the heart. And somewhere, perhaps, Robert and Lucia Quinn were together again, looking down at the family they had created, the lives they had touched, and the love that continued to echo through time. They had started with nothing but hope and determination. They had built an empire of love. And their story, the story of a cowboy who freed a captive woman and won her heart, would be told for generations to come, inspiring others to choose love, to choose freedom, and to believe in the power of second chances. The metal shackle that had once bound Lucia's wrist was long gone, melted down and forgotten. But the scar remained in family memory, a reminder of where they had come from and how far they had traveled. It was a scar that had healed into something beautiful, proof that even the deepest wounds could transform into sources of strength. In the end, their story was simple. A woman was forced to serve at a saloon. A cowboy bought her contract and burned it. They fell in love. They built a life. They lived happily ever after. And really, what more could anyone ask for? It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, tested by adversity, and proven true through decades of devotion. It was real, it was powerful, and it was absolutely, perfectly complete.